Okay.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Candida Rifkind, and I'm a professor in the English department at the University of Winnipeg. We're very excited to be launching our symposium, 80 Years and Beyond, on Canadian comics. And in the next few minutes, each of the co-organizers is going to say a few words by way of welcome and explanation about the conference. Before we begin, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. So I'm coming to you today from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and my university, the University of Winnipeg, and my home are on Treaty 1 territory. Treaty 1 territory, which is located on the traditional territory of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. I also want to recognize and honor Treaty 3, and in particular Shoal Lake 40 First Nation, as the source of Winnipeg's clean drinking water. I am grateful to the First Nations and Métis people who continue to protect and care for this land and water as their ancestors did, and who are leading with generosity, courage, and strength in all our communities to demand that we remember and redress the violence of Canada's colonial past and present. I encourage you, wherever you are, to find out about the land you occupy and the water you drink. I also encourage everyone to read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action, especially those that apply to education, museum, and archives. As we're coming together virtually over the next 2 days to discuss Canadian comics in Canada, I invite us as a community to place Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit artists and storytellers at the forefront of our conversations, and in ways that may trouble our understandings of Canada itself. As many of you know, there is an efflorescence of Indigenous comics in Canada right now, and here's just a few. So these comics are ranging from educational and history comics to coming-of-age stories, to Indigenous futurist and fantasy comics, and language revival comics. Land acknowledgements may seem performative or insufficient, and they are certainly both, but they also call us to attention at the beginning of our gatherings and open up a space for thinking about the work to come. For those who are interested in learning about Indigenous comics, I'll drop some links in the Zoom chat in a second. The Beguiling, one of our sponsors, has a feature list of comics titles by Indigenous creators. Sequential Magazine, another one of our sponsors, published an excellent article on the past, present, and future of Indigenous comics recently. And a few of us in this symposium have worked on an Indigenous comics annotated bibliography. So when I'm done talking, I'll drop those in the chat. I also want to mention that we're going to email out a list of references and resources following the symposium that will include these and any other references made during the symposium in the chat. Finally, I want to mention that one of the originally listed presenters, Jennifer Gibson, is unable to present her work on an exhibit by Inuit cartoonist and artist and writer Alutuk Aipali, who, along with one of our other guest presenters, Fiona Smith, was inducted into the Canadian Cartoonists Hall of Fame in 2019. But Jennifer and her Gallery 1CO3 team here in Winnipeg posted a series of blogs and a video tour of the exhibit of Alutuk's work, which was here in Winnipeg in 2019. And I'll put that link in the chat now as well. So now I'd like to hand it over to Ivan Cockmerick to speak a bit about the ideas behind this symposium, and I'll stop sharing my chat.
Thank you, Candida. I can share with everybody that the germ for this idea of this gathering actually began 5 years ago when we tried to commemorate the 75th anniversary of Canadian comics. That is the publication of the first Canadian floppy comic book, which was Better Comics #1, coming out of Vancouver with a cover date of March 1941. It fizzled a little bit at that time, but the 80th anniversary came around 5 years later this year, and I ran the same things up the flagpole, and this time we got a bite from, among other things that we were trying to do to commemorate this year, and we got a bite from Sequential Magazine, and especially Zach Rondinelli, PhD student at Brock, and Brendan Montgomery came aboard, and we formed an umbrella organization called the Society for the Promotion of Canadian Comics. And our committee for developing a conference, a symposium, calved off of this, and it involved myself, Zachary, and Megan Scanlon from the Library and Archive Canada, and Zachary brought in Benjamin Wu from Carleton University. But sadly, Benjamin had to bow out of the group because of his work commitments, but he had already contacted Candida Rifkin from University of Winnipeg, and she came on board. We were fortunate enough to get a replacement, an enthusiastic replacement in Dominic Grace for Benjamin. And early in the summer and working through the summer, we produced what's in front of you now. And we hope you will find this, this gathering positive, find it engaging, and perhaps even edifying. So I look forward to what's going to happen in the next few days and welcome everybody and enjoy what's going to come. Thank you. I'll hand it over to Megan Scanlon.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Megan Scanlon. I'm Senior Special Collections Librarian at Library and Archives Canada. I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes about the fact that a number of our participants are librarians or are involved with libraries or library education or the heritage sector in some way. And I'm really excited to have this occasion to talk about the role information professionals have to play in preserving Canadian comics and making them known. As we all know, comics started life as an ephemeral art form. When the Second World War comics were published, they were printed on cheap newsprint and nobody considered them worth preserving. Now, of course, our point of view on the value of comics has changed a lot, but in some ways they retain that ephemeral quality and can be difficult to capture. The floppy magazine format most people think of when they think of comic books is challenging for libraries to collect. Independent comics and zines may also fly under the radar of many collecting institutions. So a gathering like this presents a great opportunity to bring information professionals together with comics creators, as well as the comics research community, to discuss how we can best go about making sure readers can find Canada's amazing comic books. And it seems very appropriate to me that we're starting off our symposium today with John Bell, an archivist, collector, and pioneering Canadian comics researcher who did so much to get things in motion when he donated his large collection to Library and Archives Canada, where I'm fortunate enough to be able to work with it. That's about all I have to say. And now I'm going to pass it over to Dominic Grace, who will tell us more about the conference structure.
Thanks, Megan, and hello, everyone, and welcome ethereally to Brescia and 80 years and beyond. I guess I shouldn't be happy that Benjamin had to drop out, but I'm delighted that I was able to be involved in helping put this together. If you've reviewed the program, you probably already know how the event is structured, but just to recap, the event is combining live presentations and talks with pre-recorded presentations that will then be discussed in live roundtables by the participants. If you were here now, that means that you have the links and passwords necessary to access the live sessions. If you're not here now, see me afterwards. Links to the pre-recorded sessions are also in the program. We do recommend watching these before attending the roundtables and panels. The speakers will be recapping briefly what they talked about, but the full context for the discussion is in those videos, which are available online for you. Whether live or discussing pre-recorded presentations, each session will begin with the presenters either going live or briefly recapping what they said in their videos, and then having a discussion, followed by discussion among the panelists. We definitely invite questions from anyone who's attending, and you can start posing them in the chat function basically whenever you want to, but we'll be formally opening the floor for questions and more general discussion probably about half an hour from the end of each session. Sessions are being recorded, so be aware of that. If you don't want your voice or image captured, leave your video off and your microphone off. And will be made available after the conference, as well as Candida indicated earlier, a list of resources posted to the chat. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to Zachary Rondinelli.
Thank you very much, Dominic. My name is Zach Rondinelli, and I'm a third-year PhD student at Brock University in the Faculty of Education. I'm coming to you today from Niagara Falls, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples on land covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. At this time, the organizing committee would like to take a couple of minutes to offer up our sincere thanks to some of our sponsors. So first, we'd like to thank Brescia University College for hosting the symposium. A virtual conference is no easy task, and there are many technical considerations to attend to. So we are grateful for the help that Brescia's IT offered to us as we organized. Next, we'd like to express our gratitude to the University of Winnipeg. Canadian Literature, a Quarterly of Criticism and Review, along with its editor, Christine Kim, and Sequential Canadian Independent Comic Book Magazine for their financial support. These amazing sponsors have made it possible for us to not only invite the amazing keynote presenters that you will hear from over the span of this symposium, but thanks in large part to grants awarded to us by the University of Winnipeg, we are also able to offer honoraria to each and every artist and creator who is joining us today. At the outset of this project, it was our desire to see that every invited artist be compensated for their time and commitment, and we are so glad to have been able to make that a reality. We are also incredibly grateful to the work of Peter Berkmo of the Beguiling Comic Book Store, who has graciously agreed to feature the work of our creators, scholars, and participants on the store's website. You can find the link in the chat now. I'm just going to share it with you all. And I would encourage you to check out and support these artists by purchasing their work. I'd also like to thank my colleagues on the organizing committee who have been such an inspiration to work with over the course of this past year. You've heard from each of them by now, Dr. Candida Rifkin from the University of Winnipeg, Dr. Dominic Grace from Brescia University College, Megan Scanlon from the Library and Archives Canada, and Dr. Ivan Cockmerick, whose vision for this event formed the foundation of our efforts. So thank you all for diving into this endeavor to celebrate comics in Canada together. Before we begin our conference, I'd also like to take a moment to plug the special issue of Canadian Literature that will be co-edited by Dr. Rifkind and myself. We're inviting submissions of original unpublished work in both prose and comics form. And you can find the call for papers over at the Canadian Literature website, and the deadline to submit will be January 5th, 2022. We're looking forward to bringing some of the amazing contributions from the symposium to this special issue, and are also excited to read some of the original submissions. Maybe some of you will submit after you find inspiration or already have found inspiration from these amazing presenters. Finally, we want to remind everyone that we're gathering over these 2 days to share ideas, challenge assumptions, and engage in debates, but that we need to remain respectful of each other's ideas and different opinions as we do. We also need to recognize the diversity of backgrounds, experiences, and identities in our meeting space. The conference organizers ask everyone to remain respectful and generous throughout these 2 days, to listen to each other carefully and compassionately, and to contribute to an inclusive and productive symposium of ideas. If anyone at any point feels as though this commitment is not being upheld, we encourage you to send us a private chat message on Zoom, DM our Twitter account at CDN Comics, or send us an email at canadiancomicsymposium@shaw.ca. And with that, we have just under 15 minutes before we begin our first keynote presentation. So I think I would invite everybody to take a very short break. Don't go too far, and then be back at your computers in 10 minutes or so as we begin our first keynote. Thank you all for being here with us.